Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Darryle. My proposition of fact claim is assisted suicide is a treatment option used to end a life suffering in terminally ill patients. Assisted suicide is suicide committed with the aid of another person, sometimes a physician. The term is often interchanged with physician-assisted suicide, PAS, which involves a doctor knowingly and intentionally providing a person with the knowledge, means, or both to commit suicide. I'm going to introduce 4 claims of facts about assisted suicide, something that can maybe give you a little knowledge about, the benefits of it. First, assisted suicide alleviates suffering in patients. According to CNN Network, which is a cable news network, Library 2018, individuals must have a terminally ill as well as a progressive prognosis of 6 months or less to live. Assisted suicide allows a person suffering from a prolonged illness to choose if he wants to end the suffering and face death with dignity. Second, assisted suicide helps end a life discreetly. Maintaining life support systems against the patient's wish is considered unethical by the law as well as medical philosophy. The pain of waiting for death is more traumatic. Third, assisted suicide relieves the patient and family of undue stress. When there is no other medical alternative or pain medication to relieve the suffering, it leaves the patient with no alternative than assisted suicide. According to Health Service Executive 2017, while palliative sedation is not intended to end lives, the medication carries a risk of shortening life, which is a type of euthanasia. Electing to die by terminal sedation is also a choice, provided it is freely made by the patient. Lastly, assisted suicide is being implemented across the country. According to CNN Library 2018, October 27, 1997, Oregon's Death with Dignity Act became law, and it was passed in a 1994 election with 54% of voters in favor. November 1998, American pathologist and assistant suicide advocate Jack Kevorkian, known as Dr. Death, videotaped the death of Thomas York, who had Lou Gehrig's disease. He was charged with murder because he injected the drug into York himself. He didn't let York do it. He actually did it himself. On March 26, 1999, Kevorkian is convicted of second-degree murder and delivery of a controlled substance. He serves 8 of a 10 to 25-year sentence. In Oregon, as of January 19, 2018, prescriptions have been written for about 2,000 patients, and about 1,300 patients have died from ingesting the drugs that were legally prescribed to them under the law. In Washington, according to the 2017 annual report, since 2009, prescriptions have been written for about 1,400 patients, and there have been about 1,360 reported patients' deaths. So, in conclusion, patients who are terminally ill or suffering from chronic, debilitating pain, incurable by medication or any other means, should have the right to end their life with dignity from the option of assisted suicide. Thank you very much.
All right, let's start with some good things, because there are a lot of good things here. It's well organized and easy to follow. You signpost as you go along in the body of the speech, and you deliver it pretty effectively. You do a good job about citing the sources, especially information about the number of patients who have utilized these resources in Oregon and Washington, for example. So I think that you're solid there. The organizational issue that I have a problem with is at the beginning of the speech. There's no real preview of what's coming up, and so I'm listening to each of those points as they arrive, and I'm not sure what's going to be next. So I think that's a little bit of a problem. And at the end of the speech, I thought that the review was okay, but like I said, in the body of the speech, I think things are pretty solid. The biggest issue that's jumping up in front of me at the beginning of the speech is that it's not clear that you're making an argument. You're describing what people do. You're describing what physician-assisted suicide is and why people do it. What's not being described is that it's necessary, or that people suffer because they don't have access to it. Those would be claims of fact. That assisted suicide is the only effective alternative to sorts of treatments. You mentioned palliative care, for instance, and if there is an argument that suggests that one is more effective than the other, or one has fewer problems associated with it than the other, that would be a claim of fact. But you don't really talk about a comparison there. You just kind of mention that it exists and it's a different way of handling this. I'm going, well, that's information, it's narrative, it's expository in nature, but it's not declarative. It doesn't say that's better, or that works more effectively, or that's why we ought to be doing it. Your proposition is actually at the end of the speech. The last thing that you say is really what your argument is about. And, I'm going to kick you around a little bit on this one, because it's a proposition of policy. It's an argument that says that we should be allowed to do this kind of thing, which is not really what the assignment is. So what you need to do is take the argument, the information that you have, and build an argument that says the failure to have access to physician-assisted suicide is harming people. All right? And that there are people who have pain and suffering in the last 6 months of their lives that can't be relieved with palliative care. That they live in places where there is no access to physician-assisted suicide, and as a consequence, they lose dignity and suffer. And then the argument is the absence of this is creating a harm, which is a claim of fact. All right, and that's the way to take what you've got and put it into a factual dispute. We talked about this a little bit. I tried to give you some direction on that, and I thought that that's kind of where you were headed. But as it turns out, like I said, it's more an informative speech about what physician-assisted suicide consists of than an argument that says it fixes this problem. There is some hint of that it fixes a problem, but like I said, it really feels less like that's what your argument is about, and more it's like, well, let me explain what it all is. And the explanation is part of what you're doing, but it can't be the point of what you're doing. And I think that's where the problem is in your speech. Okay? All right.